Crypto markets, and I guess all markets in general, can continue to be extremely confusing, chopping sideways and liquidating over leveraged traders back and forth on both sides. So I don't know, don't be an over leveraged trader who's getting liquidated when Bitcoin is basically trading in a $1,000 or $2,000 range, seemingly endlessly. We're going to talk about the markets, but there's a lot of news also to discuss. Of course, the case against Nate Chastain at OpenSea for insider trading, which I know we have some serious opinions on here, whether that is legitimate or not. Of course, everything happening with Sam Bankman-Fried at CFTC, Solana being down again, and just generally what we're thinking about the market. I've got three amazing guests today: Dave Nadig, Peter Saddington, and Chris Temme when he shows up, which should be soon. You guys do not want to miss this. Let's go.
Let's go.
What is up, everybody? I'm Scott Melker, also known as the Wolf of Wall Street. Before we get started, please subscribe to the channel and take your Snoop Dogg figurine and hit the like button with Snoop Dogg's head. I randomly have a Snoop Dogg. It doesn't really look that much like him, I'm going to be honest. I bought it, and I was frankly a bit disappointed. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to still support him in his NFT ventures and have his statue right here. So guys, yesterday we had some major technical difficulties, which we've had basically happen twice. We don't know if it was the internet, StreamYard, YouTube, but apparently I looked a lot like Max Headroom and attempted to talk for about 20 minutes with a very jerky, robotic voice and face. And we cut that short. So if you guys do, I only found out it was even happening from looking over at your guys' comments in the chat. I had no idea because to us, everything looked like it was going wonderfully. But I don't see anyone complaining yet. So I'm going to assume that for this very moment, we are still good to go. As I mentioned, I got three amazing guests today. I'm going to just go ahead and bring them on. Let's do it. I got Dave Nadig. You guys know Dave. He's been here quite a few times. Peter Saddington. And, of course, Christopher Temme from bitFlyer. Dave's at ETF Trends. Peter is a known VC and also a miner. And you'll see actually in Peter's background right there, you're like, why is Peter in a garage? He's in his mining facility. Is that right, Peter? That's where you are right now? I think you're muted, just so...
Yes, I am in my mining facility, but I also have an awesome go-karting company that is co-loing with us. So we get to mine massive amounts of Bitcoin. Maybe I can take us a stroll later and show you guys, but it's awesome to be able to mine Bitcoin and work on race cars and carts at the same time.
Wow, that's pretty dope. Awesome. Yeah, I was like, that looks like a four-wheeler in the back, but I'm not going to even mention it. That's awesome. So listen, seems like actually now might be not a topic I was going to discuss, but seems like one of those decent times to get into mining.
Absolutely. I think what is really interesting, I'm just going to throw it out there. You guys might have different opinions about that, but with this market downturn and with all my VCs and LPs and investors going, it's Armageddon, Bitcoin's depreciated, life is going under. Peter, what's going to happen? The answer is hold and actually invest more. Because now, since the prices are depreciated, hardware infrastructure costs are dropping to the bottom, now is the time to buy up lots of machines and infrastructure and mine as much Bitcoin as possible. That's my 2 cents. You guys might have different opinions.
Yeah. I had never, I always found mining to be extremely daunting, but I actually started to dabble the week that China went completely offline last year. I was like, if there's ever a time to do it, it's going to be when 50% of the hash rate is going offline, machines cost half as much, and I can mine cheap Bitcoin, right?
So, absolutely. If I can give you some insider information, just 4 months ago, ASIC...
Can't give insider information anymore.
You just get sued.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
It's not insider information, but not everyone's in the mining game. I like to educate a little bit, but just 4 months ago, these SJ19 Pro Bitmain miners were selling for 12 grand. Now we're finding them at 5.5. And so over 50%, they're mining the same. You're getting the Bitcoin at depreciated price. Now's the time to mine even more.
How many rigs are you running there?
I can't tell you, but it's very large. maybe I can show you guys a little bit later. I don't want to take up.
It's a big building. I could definitely tell that. So I mean, so obviously that gives sort of your answer to where we're at the market, which is that we're sort of in this bear market accumulation, and inevitably things will rise. And I think we've all seen markets just go up and to the right.
Absolutely.
With
And you
enough
guys have
time.
been around long enough to know that some of the greatest companies and startups have been built and grew and prospered during a market meltdown or a downturn in the market. And so now's the time to dig in your heels, especially if you're an investor.
Chris, you're at an exchange, obviously. I mean, what are you guys seeing now? I guess in terms of, we know that the volatility has been dampened to some degree, but in terms of volume, I guess institutional versus retail volume at this point, I mean, do you feel like this is mirroring sort of bear markets of the past when we start to see that lack of interest, and or are we still
kind of, but
hopeful?
we do see spikes in our volumes, instantaneously as the price moves. So there would be long periods, and when I mean long periods, it could be like days or so of just no action, very low volumes on our exchange, which is admittedly quite painful, not just for us but for our market makers and all the participants in the market. But then we would see sudden price moves, and then our volumes would just skyrocket, and there'd be a ton of action. So it's hurry up and wait, slow down and move fast. It's never a dull moment, even in these bear markets. So.
Chris, you guys are like, I think this is right, like if not the one of the largest exchanges in Japan. Do you think is there like a local difference in crypto owners and crypto traders? Is it different being sitting in New York or Boston versus sitting in Tokyo versus sitting in London?
Absolutely. Just the retail demographics in the United States versus that in Japan is completely different, right? And admittedly, in the U.S., our size of our organization here is a drop in the bucket compared to Japan, right? So yeah, by far, Japan is largest exchange in the region. It's a household name. Here in the U.S., we still struggle for that brand recognition, but we're trying. But in Japan, as you guys probably know, like day trading and retail trading is a very common thing in a lot of households, right? Usually run by the matriarch of the house, right? So Mrs. Tanaka, right? So the husband's out working all day, and the woman of the house is maintaining all the finances, right? And so she spends a lot of time day trading. So yeah,
wild.
I mean, volumes in Asia are astounding when you compare them, certainly for people who are day trading. It's like you said, it's not even close. But also, I guess that begs this sort of next obvious topic, which is regulation. Because, I mean, most exchanges are seeing volumes offshore because they're afraid to even operate in the United States in the first place, right? I mean, 90% of the volume, people aren't even attempting to work here, right? I mean, most exchanges just say, forget the United States, we're not even going to have a presence.
Yeah. I mean, so we're a regulated licensed exchange, and I'm not going to lie, it's very, very it's capital intensive to maintain those licenses. But we think it's a major differentiator, right? So we have we operate in New York, so we New York is a tremendous market for us. There's been change in administration at the DFS, and we have very strong relationships with them, and it's. We think it's an investment that's worth holding on to, worth fighting for. Absolutely.
Not being on the exchange side of the house, I'm just curious, Christopher, what type of inbound do you receive when there's market meltdowns? Like what are your LPs? What are your investors? What is your board saying? Because as a platform, right, I would think a lot of your de-risking of your OpEx, CapEx, and these types of things are covered by your projections of user-based growth, as well as conversion and as well as trading. And we don't, in general, from an investing standpoint, trading does go down a little bit, right, when the market melts down, but in sum total, it doesn't really change all that much. So I'm curious as to what type of crazy the sky is falling inbound you get during market meltdowns as an operator of a cryptocurrency exchange.
Yeah. So I'm, during these times, we are always really in close contact with our institutional account holders, and there are market makers, there are liquidity providers on our exchanges, and of course each account holder has different strategy, but the market makers are relatively market neutral, right? So they have been relatively ineffective in the drop in price. But what the good thing is, in our business, we have two sides of the business. We have the marketplace product, where retail investor or retail traders, people like you and I, or could just take out their mobile phone and buy, sell crypto. And then we have the exchange, which is more institutionally driven. And so we noticed that, like, when one side of the business is slowing down, people, regular investors might be, paper hands selling off and then running for cover. There's still a lot of opportunity for the institutional investors. So we're kind of hedged on in that sense, which is.
But I imagine if you're invested in an exchange, then you understand that there's going to be bear markets. I would hope. I mean, I know, but it's unbelievable when you see the way that some of these projects and such manage their treasuries. You would think that they don't ever expect, and they're never seemingly prepared for the drop and to have no money to operate. But as a major exchange that's regulated, I'm assuming you have a projected burn rate if things go bad, or.
Sure. What's interesting is that prices are going down. There's a major volatility. Our business, we collect fees, and so we like that volatility. But our fees are collected in the currency. So if we're still collecting this many bips or this many percentage points, but that net, if we translate to the USD, is trends a little bit down. So it's it kind of one offsets the other, which is.
Yeah, we're all currency.
Yeah, I mean, when Luna goes to zero, it's not really that fun to be getting paid your fees in Luna, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I always sing the Encanto song here. We don't talk about Luna. No. It's become like a meme here because everybody's so tired of hearing about it.
Fair enough.
So obviously, Dave, you and I were talking right before the show. We've sort of now seeing, I think for the first time, this move, certainly led by Sam Bankman-Fried, to really start pushing regulators in the United States to not only, of course, get more comprehensive and clear regulation on crypto, but also to start to move into that sort of tokenize everything, get everything trading 24/7 movement. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I tend not to get caught up in the cult of personalities that run around some corners of crypto, but I got to say, I'm a big fan of what FTX is doing, pushing this ball forward here. And I thought the way he in particular handled, I watched the whole thing, and the way he handled himself was just freaking brilliant. Like, I think he's absolutely world-class in terms of how he, particularly when he got a little feisty. I appreciated that. And I thought it was very
dumped on them pretty hard. Yeah.
And I thought it was very
where he basically said, "Hey, listen, boomers, my customers are smarter than you." Yeah. That's really what he said, in a much more eloquent manner than that. But
it's somebody who's had to wrestle with Washington for a decade or for it's true. Like, the folks who sit on those committees, for the most part, do not know the depth of what they're talking about. Now, most of the time they know they don't know that, and you can have a productive conversation. And certainly there are lots of folks in Congress that I think this community has had very productive conversations with. So I think what they're doing is great. I think the angle that they've taken here, the sort of long game, starting with LedgerX and then, getting that everything all buttoned up the way it needed to be, and now asking for these mother may I approvals to expand the remit underneath the framework that already exists in U.S. law, I think is brilliant. I think it's really difficult to, as somebody who spent my whole life in traditional finance, it's difficult to cotton to the arguments that the big, like the CME and the major institutions were making against the FTX proposals there. They don't actually hold much water. What they're asking to do is very simple. It's basically within the boundaries of what they should be allowed to do anyway. It's a system that's really well tested outside the United States. And to your point, with 90% of the activity happening outside the US, at what point are we just going to be the emerging market of crypto? And, as somebody who's spent my whole life here, I wouldn't mind the US being a major player. That seems like a good idea. So we've got to get these things over that finish line. And, if we have to get behind SBF to do that, I'll put my flag there.
Do you think, Dave, I'm curious, because there's a lot of, we're talking about regulation here. So I'm curious, there's a lot of debate on either side. There's the debate around, should operators and companies push and be the tip of the spear to educate legislators, or should there be the other idea would be, should we partner with them and educate them about the nuances, idiosyncrasies, and market demands and needs that are out there. I think it's hard because, again, the legislators are so far removed from the actuality of what's happening in crypto. They don't have their finger on the pulse, right? We got politicians tweeting stuff like, just don't mine. Well, obviously I'm highly biased, right? It's killing the planet. It's like, no, we're actually really good people and we're making a lot of jobs. You know, these types of things. And so I'm curious, is FTX doing it right? Is that the right mechanism to say, we are the experts, let us lead and guide you, and then end up bumping up against constraint after constraint after constraint? What's the balance here?
I don't think there is another way, right? Because, like, look, if we lived in a Pollyanna world of the 1960s where we actually had Congress get together and make laws, then sure, there's a legislative approach here that would be better, right? That we would actually partner with a handful of senators and Congress dwellers, and you'd put a piece of legislation together that created an ecosystem. Of course, that would be ideal. But we also live in the real world, and I don't think any of us think that comprehensive, securities re-regulation is going to get passed as a law in the next 6 years, much less the next 2. So the only angle we've got is either just abandon the United States, which, as you point out, Scott, is what most people have done, or you work within the boundaries of the system and try to educate these committees and try to educate the regulators, not the legislators, as much as possible, because the regulators generally have the ability to move quicker and to change the boundaries to allow for innovation. So I think that the way that they're approaching this, pushing on the CFTC in particular, is exactly the right way. Same thing that's been going on with the SEC. I may not like what Gensler's doing, but like the process that the crypto industry is going at pushing, I think, is the correct one.
So when I was down in Bitcoin Miami just last month, ended up talking with a couple local politicians who, Miami's pretty, I would say they're above the average in terms of sophistication around cryptocurrency. I think that's a fair
friendliness.
statement.
Yeah.
And he gave me a really interesting model that I'd love to throw to you guys. He said the problem with our government is centralized. And so the entire hierarchy, the entire mental models, philosophy, worldviews, as well as working processes are all centralized. We in crypto are decentralized. And so he gave me this really interesting model. He said, should the decentralized crypto world centralize to engage with politicians? Because politicians won't give you the time of day if you're some guy out in Jakarta, or you're some guy out in Japan, or you're some guy out in Atlanta or New York. You're just an operator of a crypto exchange. You have high bias. We know that you want stuff from us. What if the decentralized group of crypto heads said, we are going to nominate a central figure to engage with you? And it was a really curious mental exercise, but at the same time, it could be the medium in which legislators will actually pay attention. It's like, we got all these decentralized knuckleheads, but you know what? This guy, I'll trust him.
I think that's what we've done with SBF. I think that's SBF, right? Whether we elected him or not, he's clearly the guy to do that.
But it's not Elon Musk. I thought Elon Musk was the
for sure. I mean, but my opinion is that, and I think everyone can agree, regulation is inevitable. And if they were to have their way without the opinion of the industry, or without doing any of the work, or without any education, we would get basically legislation based on the 1940s, or regulation based on the 1940s Howey test, and a structure that has nothing to do with decentralized assets. And we would never get the Hester Purses of the world at least pushing for safe harbor and sort of more reasonable approaches to this. So I think at this point, if you have the money and the power to do so, you go push. I don't know if you guys saw the Bloomberg article. It either came out today or yesterday. Basically shows a picture of SBF and says the crypto industry is looking for a regulator that they can dominate, or a regulator that they can push around, right? And they made the argument. My friends at Kalshi, I was actually a space with them. They pushed through the CFTC basically to do, you can bet on anything there, right? On this platform, and it's completely regulated now in the United States. What the weather will be tomorrow in Seattle, who will win the next election, when the next COVID wave will come, right? And they manage, because the CFTC is smaller than the SEC, to basically push through by just flooding them with information to the point where they just said, okay. And so there's an opinion here that we're choosing the CFTC on purpose as a crypto industry, because it's much smaller, they're less manned, and they're more likely sort of to bend, I guess, to the will. So when you have someone like SBF who will go, show up, literally can answer anyone's questions about anything for 10 hours, right? He's an effective altruist. Everyone knows he's giving all of his money away anyways. And also is willing to spend $1 billion on political donations. That's the guy you want there forming policy, in my opinion. I know that was a lot more than I meant to say about it, but it seems like he's the guy.
Well, lobbying works. Like, I mean, we can boil it down to that, right? And whether we go the old school and, you know, the crypto industry gets together and forms a PAC and a lobbying group that pretend not to talk to each other, or whether we do it just by allowing the billionaires to go do this for us. You know, I think this is the world we live in. It's faster to just get SBF showing up in Washington than it is to get, you know, 15 crypto companies to agree on the fees structure for a lobbying group. Like, I mean, that is the old way. That's how the Investment Company Institute has defended the traditional mutual fund business for 50 years. And it does work. But I think in the modern world where things are moving too fast and where, to your point, things start decentralized, getting a decentralized group to make a decision about something is challenging. That's why they invented DAOs, right?
Yeah, that's Lord of the Flies, man. That's Lord of the Flies. Let's be real.
Yeah, there's a number of like associations and consortiums that you know, participants pay like annual subscription. To be honest, like it's difficult to actually quantify the efficacy of these organizations as far as the kind of influence that they have. So we're members. You know, we constantly try to find good associations to partner up with, but you know, we really haven't found anyone that's been effective as Sam has in, you know, just the last few months. But even on the micro level, we do what we can, right? So we're still regulated at exchange, and you know that requires you know, examinations and audits. And I remember the examinations that we've been having recently are very different from the natures that we've had from like maybe 1 or 2 years ago, right? Even last year. Those exams have been a lot more educational, hand-holding them through the business, you know, explaining what it is. And now the level of sophistication is catching up, which is a good thing. It allows us to have more effective conversations and a more smoother operation, right? So it's pretty interesting. Like if you look at some of our licenses requirements, like the early versions of them, you know, they have things that like as an entity, you need a secure lockable space, like an office, right? Like we need, and so we are, you know, primarily remote, and we still have, we're still paying rent in an office in San Francisco that, you know, the plants are withering and dying, right? Because
there's
no one's been there. Yeah, but it is a secure lockable space. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're dealing with the arcane, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. If you're a real estate agent, it's the same thing. Like you work from your house, but you have to find a broker where you can physically hang a picture of your license in their window if you be able to operate it.
To your point, Scott, about the CFTC, though, I think it is worth pointing out that there is a good reason to focus on the CFTC. They have an entirely different mandate than the SEC. Like in a nutshell, the SEC's mandate is preserving the interests of the investor. The CFTC's interest is in preserving the functioning of a marketplace. Those are actually different rules, different objectives. So it's difficult for the CFTC to get backed into that corner of, but think about Wall Street, you know, mom and pops and all. They don't end up trapped in that sort of moralizing. They tend to focus much more on the mechanics of how the underlying markets are actually working.
So can I ask a question? I'm just curious about the depth of your resolve to the original philosophies of Bitcoin and decentralization, because I struggle with this regulation and the way that we're headed, in that we're essentially choosing a centralized figure. And so the question really is are we more pro crypto expansion and adoption by any means necessary, even by maybe pigeonholing ourselves into a centralized entity or figure who will speak for us, which could end up being corrupted? Or should we play the longer game where decentralization is the mechanism of communication, however that is, Lord of the Flies, Scott? Should we wait it out? I see Bitcoin maxis on either, mostly saying, well, we don't never want to go centralized, so you know, screw that. Let's just wait it out. I'm curious, because there's a desire for all of us to benefit and the whole world to benefit from the adoption and expansion of cryptocurrency. But at what compromises are we willing to make? Are we willing to give this guy all the power to speak for us?
Well, we used to short the bankers and long Bitcoin, right? And then we started cheering the bankers because they helped the number go up. And now they're all shorting Bitcoin and we all hate the bankers again, right? So it's a valid point. I mean, I think that you can be sort of conceptually a Bitcoin maximalist, but also be pragmatic and realize that you have to exist in this world. And I also think that Bitcoin itself is a agnostic technology that will continue and benefit the people who need it, regardless of what country regulates it or what authority. So I want to hear all your guys' thoughts, but I think sadly the answer is somewhere in the middle, and that most people eventually realize there's going to be some compromise. But it is funny that, like, you know, institutional adoption number is going to go to 1 million. They're all going to buy it. Then they're like, wait, shit, these guys are going to sell it the second things go bad, right?
I mean, sometimes I feel like crypto, the greenness of the cryptocurrency community, right? We're only a decade deep, if we're honest, right? Is still not battle hardened to the realities and the inflows and in the market cycles. And we're just like, oh, the bankers did it again. We knew that's what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
The bankers manipulated it again. They depressed the price, right? They bought it and they screwed Luna. Well, we're not supposed to talk about Luna. Like, we knew this was going to happen. And so I just wonder when a crypto pariah raises from the ashes and finally says, this enough's enough, right? So I'm wondering.
I think the path towards regulation is going to lead towards centralization no matter what. I mean, the irony of the FTX proposal they made to the CFTC is what the FTX is actually asking to do is to centralize what is currently a decentralized market. The futures market is radically decentralized compared to, say, the stock market, with FCMs having all of the actual authority and all of the responsibility for collecting margin from customers. I mean, it's hugely decentralized. And FTX is saying, actually, let us do it, right? So it's almost an anti-crypto argument. But I still think it's important, because without building those bridges and start really understanding how those bridges work, then crypto will always live in its little bubble, and and the US will always be an emerging market. And I don't want to live in that. I'm just
going to call you out, Dave. How many times have great intention started with, but I think it's still so, it's still so good. Well, the road is paved with good intentions.
Well,
right?
But the alternative is nothing, right? The alternative is we get zero regulatory clarity in the United States and we become a third world country. And
or we get heavy-handed regulation from regulators that don't do any work and basically get cut off.
Which is the same thing, right? Effectively,
yes.
That'll just push all the innovation offshore.
Or FTX goes true homie with them and then creates 9 million abstractions of value, and now we're just buying pink slips like everything else.
Well, FTX, I don't know if you guys saw, but FTX actually passed Coinbase last month as, I think, now the #2 centralized exchange in volume in the world. Pretty crazy. Only behind Binance, I believe.
Yeah, bonkers.
Didn't know that. New news.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely massive. Whatever they're doing is right. I mean, Chris, listen, like, this guy is, I guess, technically an SBF as a competitor, right, to bitFlyer, but it seems like everyone's cheering him regardless because we want to win.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like all ships rise on a high tide, right? So, they used to be, back in Alameda, like they used to be put a tremendous amount of volume through our exchange, right? So we have a long history with those guys. So, I love seeing the success. We have a lot of our alumni working over there right now. So, they are doing tremendous things. So, I can't help but respect the amount of progress that they're making. So, yeah.
So, Peter, speaking of decentralization, Solana. So Solana went down yesterday again for 5 hours, which is pretty short. Listen, I believe that we will live in a multi-chain world. It's something I talk about all the time, that each of these will sort of find their path and will be important, mostly because clearly none of them can scale for mainstream adoption or even where we're at the moment. But what do you guys think about these sort of... I mean, we talked about Luna briefly, but like, it seems like we're just like repeatedly shooting ourselves in the foot over and over again.
I tend to take a very graceful approach as an entrepreneur and operator. And my graceful approach is that every single cryptocurrency, aside from Bitcoin, is merely a startup. It's a project. It's a hypothesis. It's a wondering. It's a massive iteration. And so I think what we're going to continue to see are massive amounts of experiments that, unfortunately, due to the nature of decentralization and the connection to money, is that we will continue to see people lose their asses, and we'll continue to see major flaws in blockchains as they try to scale. This doesn't scare me as an operator. What concerns me is the lack of diligence that the engineers are doing, because a lot of these mistakes have already been made back in 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 with the ICO boom. So there's the thing that hurts me as an operator, as an engineer, is that a lot of these mistakes, in my opinion, I'm a decade deep now, is that a lot of these mistakes should not have been made because we already have the use cases as well as the fallout and experience reports of what's happened prior. So people are out there building stuff fast and there's money attached. We're going to continue to see this, and our jobs are continue to educate and help people make informed investment decisions rather than just emotional reactions.
I love how you called these all wonderings. I think I'm going to totally steal that, by the way. I'll try to remember to give you credit, but I love the idea that, you know, thinking about Solana or even Ethereum or any other Avalanche, any other chain being kind of just a wondering about what can we do with this? Certainly, I think almost all NFT projects is that as well. Just its raw potentiality of what could we do with something. You know, to your point about like the fact that these are mistakes that we've made before, I think we have to remember this thing is moving at light speed, man. And so, you know, yeah, we may have learned these lessons as a community, but the chances that you've got the same developer working on something, very small, because they got poached for 6 other projects between then and now.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes we might need, you know, the pain of a market downturn to flush out, you know, the projects that have legitimate value and purpose versus, you know, just you know, like hobbies or curiosities, right? Like it happens in traditional markets as well, right? Then those that actually are producing, solving a need or have a value in the market are the ones that survive.
But the amount of money associated with it is a bit of a double-edged sword. Obviously, the fact that people are, you know, and you can look anywhere in the value chain, whether it's Bored Ape Yacht Club or people just buying ICOs back in the day, right? The money coming into the ecosystem to play around is enormously valuable, obviously, because it lets you fund people's lifestyles to build this stuff. So that's great. It also allows for a kind of real ironclad testing, because if you put millions of dollars out there, bad actors will do the work for you of trying to break all of your crap. And we've seen that over and over again. So those are the plus sides. The downside, of course, is that, you know, there are a lot of small projects out there. I mean, a couple of these Discord servers where it's like 8 or 10 folks just trying to make something cool happen. And the risk is if they get popular too quickly, then it just becomes a money play when in fact they were trying to play with some technology and with some ideas and with some art. And so there's sort of a right sizing. I think of it like when people tell you to play poker, play for enough money that you care, but not enough money that it matters, right? You don't want to bet the house, but maybe betting the bicycle, you'd care, right? And I think that that's a bit of the right sizing problem we have in crypto right now, is that these projects aren't necessarily scaled in value to where it's the most effective to help generate the cool ideas.
And I would add, the vast majority of the projects that get their viral moment are way too immature for any type of scale, OPSEC, DevSec, all that stuff. I know this for a fact. And so it is you're absolutely right, Dave. It's a double-edged sword because these engineers have pure hearts. They want to experiment with nascent, bleeding edge technology, building cool stuff, and then some chucklehead with 200,000 subscribers says this is the next big shit coin.
And it's million.
They're like their Discord went from 3 to 5 engineers to now 20,000 people who want them to make them money. And so I've seen that time and time again, and that pressure of, oh, we got to build the scale because there's money involved. It's like, whoa, let's come back to first principles. You weren't in it for the money. You were actually in it for the tech because you guys have full-time jobs and you just want to build cool shit.
Yeah, it's Chris's point, right? A bit of a downturn can take some of the air out of this, and that could be pretty healthy, actually.
It does seem like most of our billionaires are very humble and still in it for the right reasons, though. I mean, SBF has roommates and drives a Corolla, right? And CZ talks about, like, I don't even bother to get haircuts because it's a waste of my time. And, you know, so I do think, though, that we still have some of that ethos. But to your point in general, Peter, I think what you said is it's brilliant and really accurate. And even Fidelity, right, a few months ago put out their paper, which was, I think it was called Bitcoin First, right? And effectively, Fidelity is as bullish as it gets on crypto in general, and they do believe in the other assets. But they made it very clear that they said, listen, there's Bitcoin, and everything else should be viewed as a VC tech play, right? It's just through that lens. And so that doesn't mean those things are bad, It just means that people have to know what they're investing in and the risks associated with doing so.
Absolutely. I make it very clear. I say every crypto project, every cryptocurrency aside from Bitcoin is a hypothesis. That grounds it in reality. It's a guess. You think it's going to work. You think it's going to scale. You think it's going to be the DAO of the future. You think this monkey with a cigar in his mouth is going to be the next best thing since sliced bread.
But do you really? But do you really? You might convince yourself.
Is it time for me to drop my Bored Ape that's worth nothing?
I do like the Bored Apes, but everything else is a money grab, seemingly. Yeah, but so, I mean, I just think that is probably the best way, certainly as an investor, to approach it. Now, I think we can make a case that Ethereum is beyond that, right? And Ethereum probably also has the benefit of being effectively deemed not a security in the United States and sufficiently decentralized. But then you get the merge and a move from proof of work to proof of stake, which does put massive question marks back on the table, even for Ethereum.
I'm just going to put my stick in the mud. When the DAO hack happened, I lost money. And when Vitalik Buterin decided to roll it back, he moved it from a decentralized economy to a centralized one. And so for me, Ethereum is more a tool for building great applications, but the philosophical underpinnings and the foundation of what made Ethereum great is no longer something that I care about. And so I'm just going to throw that out there. I think Ethereum's a great system and platform for experimentation, but it's a banker's coin. I'll just call it out. It's a banker's coin, guys.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of like your fans here from back in the Bitcoin pub. Obviously, I could see don't be dumb, Bitcoin only. ETH is decentralized, LOL. To be clear, I was saying that the United States government and regulators have deemed it sufficiently decentralized to not be a security. I'm not going down the path of whether it is sufficiently decentralized enough for Bitcoin believers or
for your use case, right? Because this gets to, like, Brent Donnelly does this, is it digital gold versus world computer, right? And
I just think they're different. That goes back to the fidelity thing, right? It's like, I mean, to me, sometimes it feels like you're Peter Schiff, right? And you're a gold maxi, and then you're like, I would never buy Amazon because I love gold, and those two don't have very much to do with one another, right? And like, if you view, I'm saying, if you view one as a VC tech play and the other as digital gold and a currency and a sufficient asset, the problem is when the lines get blurred and people obviously on the Ethereum side start to say that it has the properties that Bitcoin does, right? So yet again, just a matter of understanding what you're investing in and what it is.
Amen.
Cool. I'm getting a lot of head shakes, which is good. So listen, we talked about Bored Apes. Let's talk about NFTs and what's happening on OpenSea. Because Dave, I know you've got thoughts, and I do too. So this guy Nate Chastain, obviously, was a product manager, I believe, at OpenSea. This story was pretty widely spoken at the end of last year, September, I believe, or October. It happened.
Not news.
Right.
Yeah.
He was insider trading. So they said, right, that he basically had knowledge of what was going to be on the OpenSea front page, was buying it, and then immediately flipping it for a profit. Profit.
Which, to be fair, is a bad thing to do. Like, I'm not defending
it at all. But he made 19 ETH, which at current prices is somewhere in the mid $30,000. And is effectively facing potentially 40 years in jail.
Sure. Like, no, to be clear,
I'm not saying he'll get that, but he could get 20 years for each charge.
Jail. He'll get disgorgement and a fine and, probably no jail time, because this is how white collar crime tends to go. The thing that I find most frustrating about this is not the fact that they're bringing him up on wire fraud charges, because look, based on what we know, he legitimately committed wire fraud. Like, if you snipe people's stuff on eBay because you get ahead of them in the transaction queue, that's not fair either, right? So, like, there are rules around this stuff, and wire fraud goes back to literally the invention of the telegraph. So, like, we get it. The thing that blew me away was how many people reported this as insider trading as a securities fraud crime. Even the DOJ's press release said this poorly. That is not what he is accused of. He is not. The SEC has not gone after him. He has not been accused with securities fraud, which incidentally is the only place insider trading is technically a crime, is in securities fraud. So, like, I had a bunch of folks reach out to me last night saying, well, that's it. I guess we've decided all NFTs are securities. I was like, are you in? So no. The guy did something bad. He will get his hand slapped and disgorge his profits, I'm sure. But no, this did not all of a sudden turn NFTs into securities overnight and put them all into the jurisdiction of the SEC, which their article's saying today.
I mean, I always see the best in people, but I have my doubt. I know he knew what he was doing was wrong to some degree, but I doubt he even thought I'm breaking the law.
Oh,
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's
I mean, listen, most people who are young and are in NFTs are, yeah, I don't know. I actually can't answer that. It's not even worth probably talking about his intention, but certainly I can say I don't feel like it deserves potentially 40 years in jail.
No, it's bad acting, but as things go, it seems pretty misdemeanor-y to me.
So because we work and live under a propaganda apparatus, I'm curious as to what is the point, right? What is the outcome? What is the desired outcome? Is just dissonance? Is just conflict? Is that what it is, or is there a drive to make NFTs securities, because that has been floated before around inner circles? Is this something that needs to be regulated that way? I'm curious as to what you guys. I mean, I'll tell you right now, it's not even close to security. It's a freaking it's a JPEG on an Amazon.
There might be some NFTs that, depending on their utility and how they're structured, if they're used for fundraising or something, but like these are not securities.
But the thing is, like, these kinds of small wire fraud cases happen all the time in other parts of business, right? People go to jail for telephone scams every single month. It's the same rules and the same DOJ that's prosecuting that. So while we're all interpreting this as a giant thing because crypto happens to be involved, to me, this strikes me as absolute course of business for the internet. People are getting small fines for internet-based fraud constantly and have been for 30 years. We never read about it because it's always like, the third district of whatever files a lawsuit and they, the guy pays his fine and disgorges and does 300 hours of community service. We never read about it. I think it's really easy to read way too much into this.
However,
but to your point, go ahead, Peter, please.
I'm just going to take a moment to actually take what we're seeing and hearing here as a wonderful thing. And it's what you said, Dave. You said, because Bitcoin and crypto is involved. Isn't it awesome that almost every facet of today's world, Bitcoin and crypto is now involved?
I mean, great.
think about 10 years ago, 7 years ago. Yeah. 7 years ago, you had never heard about sports in crypto, or betting in crypto, or you were talking about betting on the weather, like mind blown. So I can celebrate, Dave, based on your color commentary here, that now Bitcoin and crypto is involved with everything. That's a huge win,
including incidental daily fraud. Yeah.
I mean, but what it does do also is, like, OpenSea is like one of these, companies that had, meteoric rise, very fast growth, right? And so what it does is it also pulls back the curtain a little bit to see what their inner workings like, right? Any mature organization would have, if not like technical controls to prevent something like this, at least some sort of internal policies that employees must adhere to, right? So, and I'm not saying that I know anything about, how their governance works internally, but, it happened, right? So, yeah.
Chris, obviously, with your company being based in Japan and seeing those tremendous volumes, do you think that there's a difference in the way that NFTs are approached? I mean, Japanese culture obviously has always had a fascination with anime and, all those things. So do you see that as being sort of a more vibrant NFT market as a result of that sort of mentality, or do you think that it's tremendously popular over there?
Absolutely, just like everywhere else right now, but tremendously popular in Japan. Absolutely.
Is it fundamentally different? I think that's sort of the point Scott was getting at, is like, otaku culture is like a real thing there. Has that sort of colored how the NFT market has grown, or is it the same NFT market we're all playing with?
Yeah, I mean, it is, it's the same, the collectibles, popular interests, right? So yeah, it's kind of similar. It takes its own kind of weird Japanese spin to it, but there's a lot of parallels for sure. So.
That's that. Yeah, I never really had thought about it, but I spent quite a bit of time over there, and I mean, culturally, it's just Tokyo, as much as Tokyo is a huge city, I was living in New York City and then spent 6 months in Tokyo. I was like, this is really 180 degrees. This is the opposite.
Wild.
There's
It's
nothing
great.
like getting smashed into a subway by a gentle Japanese man with white gloves touching you in every place to make sure that
I took video. That was one of the most sounding things. I actually took a video of it. It's funny, and I had posted it on YouTube. It was like the first thing ever on this YouTube channel, which then became dormant for like 15 years. My YouTube channel, I did nothing. And Plan B, when I interviewed him, I apparently went back to the oldest videos in my YouTube. It was like, you have this weird video of Japanese guards pushing people that you might just want to take down because it's totally out of context of your channel. So
no, you should have left that one up. The non
Could be your bestseller.
Unfortunately, I think the title was Human Traffic.
Yeah.
And they kind of maybe gave it the wrong.
So many unfortunate
context.
Choices made. Yeah.
All right, you're canceled. You're canceled, Scott.
I was young. I was young. It seemed it was the term
that's
at the
what Joe
time.
Rogan said. So you're canceled.
But we are talking about the fact that, NFTs most likely are not securities. And Dave, like you said, I think what was unfortunate is the DOJ, the guy came out and said, we want everybody to know that these are still crimes with NFTs, even if they're new or whatever the quote. So they kind of made it about that, which makes me feel like Peter, you were like, to what end, right? It feels like they're trying to set precedent. Like go and dunk on one guy very aggressively, see if that changes it. And
I have a slightly less nefarious interpretation. I think what the DOJ is trying to do is say digital assets are property, right? That's, if you look at most of the legal action that's happened around digital assets in the last year or two, divorce proceedings, some estate stuff we've seen around crypto. There's a lot of work that the DOJ has done, not securities regulators, but people who are in charge with enforcing law, which is the DOJ, to say, by the way, digital assets are property, and therefore all of the regular things you can't do with property, like say steal it, destroy it, on other people's behalf, those things are still bad when it's digital assets as well. So I actually think that that's really healthy. I agree the language in that press release was really poorly worded, but I think that there's a fundamental point here, which is that property is property and the rule of law still matters. I think that's a point worth making because, frankly, what you hear is a lot of the other from crypto haters that, like, this isn't real property. The rule of law doesn't apply. It's the Wild West. Having a little bit of like, no, it's not quite the Wild West. You still can't steal this stuff and get away with it, I think is important.
I think that's a very balanced approach, Dave, because Bitcoin maxis tend to hyperventilate about everything.
Oh, you think? But so interesting. And we talked about this here before, but not with you guys. I don't know if you guys saw the story about Seth Green last week, the old actor from Austin Powers, but he owned a Bored Ape and has created an entire TV show because you obviously as an ape owner, you own the IP, but his ape was stolen in a phishing attack. And so now technically, according to the charter, the hacker owns the IP that he's now using for his television show, and he may not be able to do it.
Even though it's stolen, it's stolen still means you don't have possession. Yeah, it's legit, right? But again, as awful as it is in one sense, because I would have loved to seen Seth Green's Bored Ape Yacht Club show.
I'm sure we still will, to be quite frank. But yeah,
and I'm sure he'll buy another one, and it'll all work out.
Imagine if the guy sues him. Steal his ape and sue him. Yeah, go.
But like it's actually good. Like that actually means that the rights being asserted by Yuga are being respected, and that's cool.
Even under the auspices of theft, that's curious to me. But
I mean, that's when you talk about. But when you talk about the full decentralization or the free market, that's a part of it.
Right. There's always the balance of personal responsibility, right? I mean, that's one of the things that I'm always promoting to newbies in crypto is that, hey, welcome to crypto. The lesson number one is personal responsibility.
Right. Your share certificates are in your safe. And if your house burns down and you didn't have a good safe, you don't own your shares in Disney anymore. Welcome to the real world. Yeah.
I remember the days of paper stock.
I have one Disney
when
share
you actually bought the underlying asset. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, Peter, I'm curious as to your thoughts about. Well, I'm sure I know your thoughts on the Bitcoin futures ETF, and Dave is my ETF master. But speaking of owning underlying asset, what do you think about the prospects or the importance of a Bitcoin spot ETF?
Oh, I think it's wonderful. And the reason why I think it's wonderful, aside from the Bitcoin maxis saying that we're just taking a traditional route and the traditional market world and the traditional finance world is taking over, and they're just going to create abstractions of value, and we're going to end up just trading pink slips, ETF, ETCs. We could go on forever. I think it's wonderful. And the reason why I think it's wonderful is we need to figure out where crypto sits in the larger market. Right now, we crypto heads tend to forget that we are a fraction of the global economy, and even less so from a financial perspective. And so there's a lot of discovery that needs to happen. And I love the iterative process and the iterative nature and the growth of Bitcoin, because we're hitting up against constraints. We're finding there's problems. We're finding that we can't get access to these people, or these people can't get access to Bitcoin. We're finding that there's concurrency constraints. There's issues with timing and blockchain speeds, scaling. All great, wonderful. Let's play, baby. Let's play. That's what Bitcoin was all about. And so I think I probably lean more heavily towards Dave's pragmatic worldview of let's play with the asset. Let's see what we can do. We're gonna push some buttons that we shouldn't have pushed. We're gonna step on some things, cracks that we shouldn't have stepped on. We're gonna fall into some holes. But at the end of the day, we all know that the fringe are the ones that need to experiment, and then eventually the fringe becomes mainstream. So Dave, you come from a traditional background. I started my life 20 years ago in traditional finance, so I get it, and I appreciate it for what it's worth. So I say, experiment away, baby. Let's run. And to take something from Christopher, a rising tide raises all ships.
Amen.
I mean, Dave, do you think we actually get one?
We better, baby, because I want to make
this year. Not this year.
Do you think we get one even under this administration?
Possible next year. Like, the SEC has asked smart questions, and it is an iterative process. And I talked to a lot of the issuers who keep putting the filings in there, and I think that the dam may break. Ironically, if FTX can convince the CFTC about this futures proposal, that all of a sudden allows you to have spot and futures trading well against each other in the same exchange. Those are the bridges. We need to build the bridges. So that may actually make it even easier to get a spot Bitcoin ETF approved. But I don't think it's this year. I mean, I think maybe middle to end of next year. But some of that's going to change depending on what happens in the election.
And we remember the regulatory ebbs and flows as Bitcoin got more mainstream, certainly with the ICO boom, which woke a lot of people up. I think we can be absolutely proud of the progress we've made, certainly from the first rumblings of regulation in 16, 17, even in 14, I remember there was rumblings, to where we are now, where we actually have senators, even ignorant as they are, promoting it. And so I'll take the ignorance, I'll take the promotion. And when it comes to Bitcoin, I say, good press, bad press, all good. Yeah.
You do have the, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Where do you think we are there? Because are we fighting? They're not laughing anymore.
I think we're fighting.
Yeah, we're fighting. There's another model by Bruce Tuckman. It's for team formation. Every team goes through 4 phases: forming, storming, norming, performing. In the beginning, they form. We got to figure out how this works. Then they storm. They figure, I don't really like you, Dave. Scott, you're actually just an asshole. And Christopher,
thank you.
Great, right? But then we get to right? Then we get to normalization, and we're like, okay, we finally figured out how to work together. And then we get to performance. And so we are at the fighting and the norming phase of team formation, I would say. And we're getting to a point where we're finally going to be able to say in the next couple of years, we kind of understand this enough to start moving forward now. Let's hold hands, not kumbaya, but let's hold hands. Let's crush it. Like, there's so much work to be done.
Chris, do you think that we're getting closer here? I mean, you probably have your finger on the pulse of this more than anyone, as far as it comes with regulators and becoming a mainstream asset.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic, right? Yeah, it's absolutely.
Buddy, somebody said here, then they're talking about Bitcoin every 10 minutes on Fox Business, which is true. Like, I remember even I was late to the game. I started in 2016, but if there was a mention of the word Bitcoin in any mainstream media, price would jump like 25%, right? And now it's a ticker next to Apple and Amazon on Fox Business.
That would be our norm.
Right. I
That would
mean,
be
2
our
weeks ago,
normie.
I went on Varney, and the guy doesn't like crypto, and he's a skeptic, but there's still the Bitcoin and Ethereum price all over it, right? And I'm going actually on Fox Business today on Charles Payne at 2:00, and I inevitably every time I show up, it's all the same, like, not a hedge against inflation, not a means of exchange, not a store of value, just gambling chips, and I have to cope like on behalf of the entire industry. But at least we're talking about it.
I just find it fascinating that we still have people that don't believe that Bitcoin is a financial market that is emerging and growing simply due to the fact that it's on every daggone stock ticker from Yahoo Finance to NBC to CNBC to Fox. So, like, people hate on Bitcoin. It's like, where did you hear about it? On Fox? It's like, well, then they apparently feel it has value enough to the viewer base in which you are a part of.
Yeah, it's
Right.
part of the zeitgeist now, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just part of our culture, and we're going to use it as a proxy for the entire digital ecosystem for a long time. Even if we stop trading Bitcoin because somebody invents something better, it's going to end up being like the Dow Jones Industrial Average, where people don't trade it, but they still mention it every time they talk about the market, right? I think
Exactly.
Bitcoin is rapidly going to end up like that as well, where it's not a thing that people use a lot, but it's a recognized benchmark for the ecosystem because it gets used inside the ecosystem.
I absolutely agree. Somehow it became 10:30, guys, which means we're about
You
done.
thought
But
you were going to
actually,
run short.
wait, we got like 1 minute left. Well, we can go a few minutes over, and you guys can jump if you want to. Peter, I want to see your facility, man. Can you like pick up the laptop
Yeah,
and
can we
just
get a
swing it
tour?
around or something? I think we all kind of want to see it. You had me at the go-karts, so nice. I feel like I'm in the Blair Witch Project, but also in a Bitcoin mining facility. It's kind of cool.
Do they just run the go-karts around on the bottom of the floor there?
I was gonna say, it looks like it actually could just use the go-kart. This place is huge.
Is he
And
riding
now
the
he's
go-kart
moving
right now?
very fast. Are you standing on a go-kart?
I'm hovering with speed.
He's on a one wheel.
All right, here
Oh,
we
this
go,
place is
guys. I
big.
can't show you all the juice, but what you see is what we're working with. These are
This place is
all
That's
Massive.
massive. Absolutely.
Woo, we're going
Jeez
around,
Louise, man.
almost dying. So what you see, there we go.
Wow.
So we're dealing in scale, and we love Bitcoin mining. So as we drive that way towards back to the karting area, all of what you're going to be seeing and I'm going to be passing, we're going to be scaling out and growing. Let's go.
That's awesome.
Your enthusiasm is
Did you guys
infectious,
see that
Peter.
the Tesla factory video with the drone?
That's
that,
what
like,
this feels
flew- Yeah,
like,
this is what we're doing that, but like maybe with a smaller budget. Guys, I bring you the high budget special effects on this
Man.
show. Did anybody ever doubt me again? Wow. So it's big.
Yes, very big, and I can continue to talk, but it's if you've ever been in an IKEA building, we're bigger than that. 23 acres is what you have to be thinking about. So we got
Jeez Louise.
a lot to cover and a lot of growth. Let me come back out here so I can make a full loop. I apologize for taking up too much time, but I'm on this bike.
No, it's amazing.
Well, this is highly
Yeah.
entertaining. I'm sure this will be the most entertaining thing that happens in my day.
Woo! We are
My
back.
week.
Almost died. And as we
Yeah, if
say,
you wipe out on camera, that's a bad look.
Yeah.
as we say in racing, but did you die? If you didn't, then we can ride again. Gentlemen, it has been a pleasure to be on site with you guys.
Guys, thank you, Dave, Chris, and Peter. I appreciate you guys taking the time.
see
Epic
that.
chat. And
Absolutely.
of course, as you all know, you're all invited back literally anytime. Literally anytime. So,
All right.
guys,
See you,
that's all I've
gentlemen.
got. As I mentioned, I will actually be on Fox Business later if any of you have a TV. Not you three, but the people over here talking about shitcoins. On the actual television, you know, those things that people watch still.
Yep.
So check that out. I'll be on Charles Bay. Guys, I'll be back also tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m. Until then, thank you once again, guys. Peace, everybody.
All right.
Peace out.
That's dope.